The following presentation is part of the Technology and the Corporation Conference Series, sponsored by MIT's Industrial Liaison Program.
Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to be one of the two Austrian speakers. And I'll talk about innovation and failure as Randall already introduced me, the basis for building the future. And I'm with the MCI in Innsbruck. This is where we are. This gives you an idea of the mountains around us. And for those who have not had the nice experience to be in Innsbruck, what are we? What is MCI? MCI is basically a tertiary education and research organization. We're a little bit smaller than MIT, scale of 100. Approximately, but we also have a business school, we also have an engineering school, we have graduate programs, we have undergraduate programs, we do research in the business school and in the engineering school, and we have an executive education branch where we do, custom-tailored programs, certificate courses, executive MBAs of some sort, and executive PhD programs. That's what we are, that's where I'm from. Now, before I start, I really like to know, is there somebody in the audience mid-30s, like 32 until 36? We have hands up here, we have, quite a number of people. And because it's important, because we have to really see, if I talk about the future, whose future are we really talking about? Who are the ones who are affected by everything that we see? Let me introduce you to this fellow. That's the son of a very, very good friend. And if I look into his eyes, he was born in November 2016. If I look into his eyes, I see really who is affected by everything that we are talking about. It is him, because if he is like the age mid-30s, it will be 2050. It will be 2050, and the world around us will have changed. The world around us will have changed. We will be, 9.5 billion people. The number of people above 65 will have tripled by that. We heard we have this demographic change. We heard that already today. If we look at where people live, we also heard it today. I mean, it's 6.5 billion people living in urban areas. And urbanization will take place particularly in the emerging economies, in the developing economies. And if we then look at the resource use, if it is like business as usual, if we continue, if we don't change our behavior, well, by 2050, we behave as if we had 3 planets to waste. Okay? So this is going to create problems. This is going to create challenges. And these challenges need technologies. And we see a lot of these technologies being presented to us today. And these technologies will really be part of any solution that we have. But it's not only the technologies. We also need the social environment, the social innovation. It's, as Harald Mahre said, there will be a social component to it. So it's not only technology. We need the social sciences, social innovation to look at these problems and how we solve the problems. Plus, we heard it today, no single group will solve problems alone. So Austria has this open innovation strategy. This is exactly what we mean here. It is the collaboration of organizations that will be able to deliver solutions to the problems. It will be the exchange of knowledge between higher education institutions, research institutions, firms. It will be knowledge exchange, collaboration between governments, regulatory bodies, etc., with firms, businesses, organizations who will finally be able to do something about the problems. So it is not one group alone. But if you look around the program, there's going to be a lot of technologies that you might think, well, great technology, we'll take this. We build products from these technologies. We integrate this into new business models, into new products, into new services, etc. And while doing this, well, I'm pretty sure you will fail. That's nothing you should worry about, because it's not only you who will fail, everybody will fail. Not all of the time, but every now and then you will fail. You will fail in your attempt to have these moonshot projects being successful. You will certainly screw up every now and then in your projects. Some technologies might work, some technologies might not work. Some technologies might fit your business models, others won't, etc. So I guess taking this lesson, we have to talk about failure. And talking about failure as sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy could be a problematic issue here, because a speech about failure could easily turn into a failure, because failure could be boring, failure couldn't be too interesting, couldn't be attractive to people to look at if you only lament about failure. So I have to do something else. I have to do something that maybe gets your attention. What are we going to do over the next 20, 25 minutes? Talk a little bit about failure, how innovation and failure are linked. Then I'll explain to you why I think learning from failure is good. I'll also talk about why learning from failure is hard and what we can do about this. Okay, now let's start with what is failure? Well, if you look at dictionaries, failure describes activities that fall short of expected or promised outputs or outcomes. That's very interesting, because it's something that it's not on the input side. It's the output. And it's sort of subjective. Subjective in a sense that what you expect and what you promise is sort of a subjective idea. So failure can be subjective. And failure definitely has a cultural component. In English, failure, well, it's a word that derives from some economic lack of supply. Okay? In German, the word scheitern is really dramatic, because it basically means that a ship wrecks, and it wrecks, that it breaks down into pieces of wood, the Scheits. Okay, so it's much more dramatic in German than in English. So failure has a cultural component as well. Now, innovation and failure, how does that link? I already indicated that you have innovation projects that might fail. But there is arguments around that failure is sort of the mother of innovation, that it triggers new products, it triggers ideas of new services. And if we really believe that failure is the mother of innovation, well, that was a research question that we set up to explore. And we looked at German firms, 1,200 of it, and 1,200 innovating German firms, and we're trying to figure out how innovation performance relates to failure, to screwing up projects, basically. And what we found is that the correlation of failure with innovation has an inverted U-shape. What does that mean? That basically means if you have low levels of failure, additional failure will sort of correlate with positive effects, with an increase of innovation performance. Above this, a certain point, this relationship turns around. That basically means we have a negative effect then. The more failure they have, the less innovative you are, the lower your innovation performance. Well, the first part of that, the positive relationship, is sort of mind-boggling. Why is that? And we strongly believe that learning is really crucial here. That learning from failure, and we have a lot of narrative evidence for that, that learning from failure is much more effective than learning from successes. Learning from failure helps you to understand what you're working at, helps you, gives you negative examples what didn't work. You know, you probably all recall this quote by Thomas Edison, who said, well, if I find out something, if I fail 1,000 times, I've found 1,000 ways things have not worked. And this type of learning experience is really, really important. And why is it important? Why is it good? The point is, it opens new perspectives. You get new perspectives once you failed with a project, once a technology didn't work, one of your moonshot projects didn't deliver, hasn't delivered. It gives you a new perspective, and this new perspective triggers creativity. This new perspective that is forced upon us by failure helps us to be more creative. I mean, there's a lot of creativity methods and instruments around there which artificially search for new perspectives. These 6 heads of something, you know, you all know from your workshops, creativity workshops, that new perspectives, getting a different perspectives, can really, really foster innovation. And it's sometimes new perspectives, as Astro Teller says. He's running X, formerly Google X. He says sometimes new perspectives are more powerful than just being smart. It gives you new ideas, forces ideas that are more cost efficient. Maybe we talk to Carrie about the satellites, how much failure, things that have not worked, really help them to shrink the satellites. You know, sometimes we get a sort of a distorted type of idea here. We're going to listen to success stories over the next 2 days, where we're not talking about the things that didn't work, I believe. So looking behind that facade will certainly help us to appreciate failure. Failure not only in the lab, but also failure in setting up new projects, setting up new business models, setting up new products or services. And probably most of you have heard the mantra of the Silicon Valley: fail fast and cheap, fail often, fail in a way that it doesn't kill you. Well, if you hear this, please do not think that you can fail your way to success. Fail fast. Fail that it doesn't kill you. I think that is not failing your way to success. I think it's more about resource allocation. Be wise in allocating your resources. Once you have a project that doesn't look promising anymore, kill it. Don't spend additional resources on a sort of an oxygen tent for a project that won't breathe by itself. So, and don't really believe these motivational speakers that you have, that success is the inevitable result of failure. Don't believe that. You better don't do that. But Thomas Watson, a decade-long president of IBM, said once, if you want to succeed, double your failure rate. Well, I don't really think it's an expression, a statement about statistics, because then he wouldn't talk about failure rate. Failure way to success, as I said, isn't anything that we should believe in. I think between the lines, he tells us it's a story about learning. If you increase the failure rate, you increase the opportunity to learn. You increase the opportunity to learn from your failures. So, what is the secret sauce here? Is failure the secret sauce to success? No, it's not. I don't really think so. And all the narrative evidence that we have points that way. It is learning that is the secret sauce to turn failure into success. So we need learning as a moderator to link up failure with success. Now, learning from failure is sort of hard. Why is it hard? Well, because, if we have failed, something or somebody had to be wrong. Somebody must have made a wrong decision, following up a project that finally ends up, an innovation project that finally ends up being killed, doesn't deliver. So why are we wrong in our decisions? Well, it's the biases that we have in our mind, that we naturally sort of have. And these biases finally lead to wrong decisions. Well, there's 3 biases that are most prominent, I would say. It's the overconfidence. The belief, you believe that you're better, that you know better than anybody else, that you're more capable. That's individuals who are overconfident. It's also organizations who are overconfident. Your organization believes it can be better than anybody else and lose sight of certain alternatives, of certain points of exit. Because if you still believe that you're better than everybody else, you disregard signs from your environment that point the other way. So you disregard early ways of exiting a project. Then we have the confirmation bias. Well, it's natural. We seek confirmation. We love confirmation. We don't really love to be rejected, right? And this frames our search processes. That frames our ideas, how we finally collect data. We search confirmation for the hypotheses that we have, rather than searching for evidence that points the other way. And so, again, this confirmation bias makes us believe that we're right. For too long a time to fail fast and early. And finally, we have the illusion of predictability. We're lousy in working with probabilities, at least when it comes to estimating workload, estimating failure probabilities, etc. We see things in too positive a light. And we hate being wrong. So how does it feel to be wrong? How does it feel to be wrong? Anybody an idea? How does it feel to be wrong? Yeah, thumbs down. It doesn't really feel good, you say. Okay. Well, I don't really think being wrong is the problem. Because, the initial problem is, being wrong is the same feeling like being right. Okay? It's the problem, it's gonna be hard when you discover you're wrong. That's the problem. Being wrong is just like feeling right. You know Coyote and Roadrunner? This comic where this coyote tries to chase and catch the Roadrunner. And there's a very predictive pattern that all of these episodes follow. Eventually, Coyote runs over a cliff. And if you watch closely, Coyote runs over a cliff, keeps on running, even though he has no ground under the feet anymore. Okay? And this is the situation when we are being wrong. And then there is a certain spot when Coyote discovers that there's no ground anymore, and then he goes like, ah, and falls down. And this is the spot that we hate. We don't hate to be wrong. We hate to discover that we're wrong. And we do everything in our minds, in our mental patterns of assumptions. We do everything not to discover that we're wrong. Why is it? Well, we learned that at school. We learned that at school that pupils, students who are wrong, who make mistakes, are either lazy or stupid. Most of the time, both. We learned this, and we learned that each and everybody of us learned it at school. If we want to be successful, we better not fail. That makes us overachievers. That makes us really, really overachievers. I mean, if I look at the audience here, physicists around, yeah. C-level executives around, yeah, somebody. Marathon runners, yeah, marathon runners. So overachieving is our way of not dealing with being wrong. And there's also mental patterns that we embark on that help us, well, wrongly, of course, to push away any signal of being wrong. The first one is ignorance. What is it when we have one opinion and one view of the world and others don't share our view? Well, one idea, one assumption is that we have is the others are ignorant. They don't have the same information as I do, because I'm right, okay? What we do is we share our information and hope to win these people over to our ideas. Well, if this doesn't work, we employ the second level of assumption, which is idiocy. You try to win these people over with your argument. Now they have the right information. They still don't buy your point of view. Well, then they must be, well, not capable of putting things together. That's the next level. Then what you do is you educate them. You tell them how you put things together. You show them how to put things together, how your arguments align, etc. If this doesn't work, well, the third level of assumption that we employ is these people must be evil. These people know the truth. They basically could buy into my opinion, but finally they don't, for their own good, for their own malevolent purposes. Okay? So we have these mental models that lead us astray, that lead us down the wrong, or down the garden path, as the English say. But it's been known at least since the 4th century, and fallor ergo sum. Basically, we all have the capacity to screw up. That's what Augustine, a church father, already said, wrote down in the fourth century. And we all hate to be wrong. All of the time? No. No, not all of the time. There is instances when we love to be wrong. There is instances when we love to be wrong. When we watch crime stories, when we read novels, we love the tension, the suspense that is built by the author, by the plot, that leads us on a wrong way, leads us to wrong conclusions. We really love that. That's the idea of these crime stories, novels, etc. So, wouldn't it be nice to have organizations that really embrace failure and being wrong in a similar way? That built on the tension that comes from being wrong. So the question is, what can we do in our organizations to embrace failure and, of course, to finally be able to learn from failure, to be better innovators and to solve the problems that are ahead of us? Well, if you fail in an organization, this failure attracts attention. Your organization or people in the organization will finally try to figure out, why were we wrong? Why was there failure? You try to build an argument around what this failure was caused by. So, what were the decisions? What were the expectations? And this is good. To build an argument is the first step of learning and the first step of learning and changing behavior, of course. But there's a negative thing about failure, which is failure causes negative emotions. As I said, we hate being wrong. We hate to fail. We're affected by failure negatively. And in the literature, we find that negative emotions generated by failure are compared to grief. They're called grief. Don't get me wrong here. I'm not saying that failing a project, failing a business, failing a startup is equivalent to losing a loved one. No. But the symptoms are comparable. I don't want to say, on the other side, I don't want to trivialize business failure, project failure, and the agony that comes from business failure, from project failure, for the ones, or with the ones, who were really, really involved in this project. And the question is, why is it that this failure generates grief? Well, because failure questions our competence, questions our relatedness, and questions our autonomy. Relatedness, autonomy, and competence is criteria that give people well-being, that make people happy. And this is really important to understand, that once you have innovation teams working for a project, they build something together. They build something hopefully endurable. They build something that is new, and that gives them a sense of competence. If this project fails, this sense of competence may go away. They're not doing it alone. They're doing it in a team that gives them a sense of belonging. They're doing something together. They're building something together. If the project fails, this sense of belonging finally goes away. And of course, it gives them a sense of autonomy. They built this stuff, hopefully with not too much interference of management. They are the ones who are in the lab and are autonomous in what path to follow, etc. They choose the structure. They choose the way to go forward. If the project fails, this goes away. And this is the reasons why failure causes grief. Point is, in organizations, we have, not only in organizations, but also you personally, have basically two options to deal with grief. First one is the grief orientation. Second one is the restoration orientation. The grief orientation is basically you start thinking about the event that led to the failure. You build a rationale, what led to the failure. So you start thinking about this failure. And you dig deep into the structures and to the sequence of events so that you have a rationale. Maybe even you build a sort of a causality that led to the failure. Problem here is the deeper you dig into that, the more your grief may escalate. So it can escalate. And that's not what we want. There comes the restoration orientation. Restoration orientation is basically some sort of the opposite. It means you don't deal with the grave. You distract yourself from the grave. You go to a basketball game, you hang out with the friends in a bar, etc. And what is really, really important, you start being proactive about the second-level stressors. Second-level stressors are the results that come from failure that provide additional stress. So if you have a failed startup, well, maybe a second-level stressor is your unemployment. Then you should, in the restoration orientation, should start looking for a job, looking for income to support your family, etc. So you need proactivity there, although you distract from failure. Can that help us to learn from failure? Not really. Because you won't really believe that if we're not thinking about the failure, we're distracted from failure. That's not really instrumental in helping us to learn from failure. So even though that might be profitable or good in building or working with your failure, well, best thing is you oscillate between these both. Grief orientation and a restoration orientation. You start building a rationale, why that happened, then you distract yourself for a while until your batteries are recharged, and then you go back and start building the rationale even further until you feel the grief is too much, you go for the restoration. And it's shown that these provides the best results for grief. Now, we know in organization where we have grief, that hampers learning. We want learning. So what can we do? Well, we can make failure part of the organization, we can normalize failure, and we can build emotionally capable organizations. Making failure part of the culture is, well, you make it safe to fail. You support your leadership team to support those people who have failed. You make failure the path of least resistance. Sweeping failure under the carpet should not be an option. Talking about failure should be easy in your organization. Enthusiastic skepticism is you have a culture in your organization. You build a culture in your organization where it's continuous behavior to challenge projects. Is it really worthwhile still working for this project? So that helps. Normalizing failure. You desensitize people a little bit. You try to desensitize them that they don't really feel rejection so badly, etc. However, if you take away these negative emotions from people through normalizing failure, that's how it is. We're an entrepreneurial company. That is part of what we do. You take away this negative emotion by this sort of culture, you can also simultaneously, and this is the disadvantage, take away the positive emotions, the passion that goes into projects. So that's a problem here as well. And emotionally capable organization is really, really helpful. Look at the culture of your organization. Establish rituals to work with grief. You all know in Austria it's the Leichenschmaus. You get together, have a social event after people pass away. That basically signals there's a social network. We're seeing organizations in Great Britain, in the US, startup centers doing exactly that. Once a startup failed, well, they get together over a keg of beer and discuss. That basically means the social community is still there. Signal that there is future, go ahead. You provide social support in your organization. Maybe you have social support groups for dealing with other emotions. Why not have a social support group for dealing with failure, with emotional stress that comes out of failure? You build an organization that does exactly what I just said. Learn to oscillate between this grief orientation and the restoration orientation, maybe as part of your debrief of projects that failed. And you should build a culture that is humble and appreciative towards failure. There is one organization in Austria, that builds the best chocolate ever made on this planet. And they go a long way, and they load failure with a little bit of humor, which is not the worst thing. It may be the icing on the cake or the filling to the chocolate if you work along these ideas. They have a graveyard at Zotters in Styria. They have a graveyard for ideas. So they really have gravestones there for failed ideas, for failed recipes and flavors, such as string bean and onion, as a filling of a chocolate, mind you. Successful but replaced flavors, pineapple and pepper, was successful but has been replaced, for instance. And we're talking about a graveyard. Taking that with quite some humor, exhumation is possible. So there was this pink coconut and trout marshmallow filling of chocolate, which seems awkward but had a strong fan community. Once they buried that flavor, there was strong incentives, strong reactions by the fan community of this particular chocolate flavor. So there was an exhumation, and I still have it in the portfolio. Now, as a summary, as I said, we have the challenges, we have the failures likely to happen, and we have learning that we only can do once the organization can handle these negative emotions. Now, innovative organizations should be more appreciative and more humble towards failure. That's my claim here. And as you are leaders of organizations, and it is about steps and strategies today, why not take steps immediately or after you leave the conference? Be appreciative and humble towards failure. And I wouldn't be a good teacher if I left this stage without a homework for you. I suggest you go home, you go to your office, you retreat to your office, maybe you lock from the inside, and write down a CV. You write down a CV, not with your successes, not with your achievements, but with your failures. Write down the failures that you had in your career and what you learned from them. And I believe it makes you a little bit more humble, a little bit more appreciative towards failure. Then you lock it away, and I suggest every now and then you put it out, read it again, append it with the failure that happened to you in between. Thank you, and I'll be interested in how it goes with your CV of failure. Thank you.